The message arrived on a Tuesday evening while I was sipping my chamomile tea. It wasn't a request, nor a conversation starter. It was a direct order. I sold our house to pay off my parents' debt. The text from my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, read, "Tomorrow, my entire family is moving in with you. No, please. No, is this okay? Claudette." Nothing. Just the arrogant assumption that my four-bedroom home was a free hotel for her, my son Arthur, and her endlessly demanding parents. Arthur wasn't even copied on the text message. He gave up making his own decisions years ago, perfectly content to let Vanessa steer his life while I quietly subsidized it. 10 years ago, I might have panicked. I would have called Arthur crying, begging him to be reasonable. I would have folded because of that old guilt trip that family takes care of family. Tonight, I didn't shed a single tear. I didn't even feel my heart race. I just felt a cold, crystal-clear calm. I set my teacup down. I opened my blue folder on the kitchen counter. Everything was in perfect order. The timing was almost poetic. Vanessa thought she was staging a hostile takeover, relying on my old habit of staying silent to keep the peace. She didn't know the silent treatment had an expiration date. I picked up my phone and typed a single line. "I just sold mine too." I hit send. Then I opened my laptop and booked a one-way ticket to South Carolina for 6 the next morning. I didn't block her number immediately. I wanted to see the fallout. 15 minutes later, my phone exploded. Calls, texts, and voicemails poured in back to back. The screen flashed relentlessly with Vanessa's name, then Arthur's. I flipped the phone face down on the counter. They were out of time, and I had packing to do. My phone vibrated so hard it started inching across the granite countertop. I ignored it and walked into the living room, grabbing a roll of packing tape from my desk. Vanessa's assumption that I would just absorb her family's financial disaster was insulting, but not surprising. For the last 3 years, she treated my house like her personal storage unit and my bank account like a backup fund. What she didn't know was that exactly 8 days ago, I sat across from a real estate developer and signed the closing papers on this exact property. The house was too big. The maintenance was exhausting, and I was tired of being the anchor holding down everyone else's ship. The buyer paid cash and wanted quick possession. The money cleared my bank account yesterday morning. I was supposed to move out by Sunday. Vanessa's text simply accelerated my timeline. I pulled a suitcase from the hall closet. I only packed the absolute essentials, my important documents, my grandmother's jewelry box, my laptop, and enough clothes for a new climate. The movers were originally scheduled for Friday. I picked up my landline, called the foreman, and offered him a generous cash bonus if his crew could arrive at 4:30 a.m. instead. He agreed without hesitation. Upstairs, I walked through the empty guest bedrooms. Vanessa had already started moving boxes of her mother's winter clothes into the blue room last month without asking me. I grabbed some heavy trash bags. Anything that didn't belong to me, I dragged out to the curb. I wasn't angry. That was the strangest part. I just felt incredibly focused. Every item I tossed out felt like shedding a physical weight. Downstairs, the cell phone finally stopped buzzing. I flipped it over. 42 missed calls. One new text from Arthur. "Mom, what do you mean you sold the house? Vanessa is freaking out." "Pick up." I deleted the message thread. They expected a safety net tomorrow morning. Instead, they were going to hit a very hard floor. Around midnight, the house was mostly bare. I left the large furniture for the movers, but I made sure to strip away everything that made the house a home. I walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. Vanessa loved my cooking. She often dropped by unannounced on Sundays, expecting a full roast dinner for her, and her parents never offering to wash a single dish. I grabbed a garbage bag and emptied the shelves. Milk, eggs, leftover casserole condiments all into the trash. I wiped the glass clean. If they somehow managed to get inside tomorrow, they wouldn't find a single drop of water or a crumb of bread. Next, I went to the bathrooms. I unscrewed the expensive rainfall shower heads I bought last spring and replaced them with the cheap plastic ones I kept in the basement. It was a petty move, I admit, but rolling that Teflon tape around the pipe gave me immense satisfaction. Vanessa always underestimated me. Last year, she found my spare key and started letting herself in while I was out. I came home to find her snooping through my home office looking for my bank statements. When I demanded the key back, she rolled her eyes and called me paranoid. Arthur just stared at his shoes, refusing to defend me. I changed the locks the very next morning. That was the day I realized I had no son, just a dependent. I walked to the thermostat in the hallway and turned the heating system completely off. The November air outside was biting, and the house would be freezing by dawn. I zipped my suitcase shut and left it by the front door. My plan was simple, airtight, and completely mine. I didn't need to argue with them. I didn't need to explain myself. My actions were going to speak loud and clear. I lay down on the bare mattress for a few hours of sleep. I needed to be ready. The real show was starting in just a few hours. At exactly 4:30 a.m., headlights swept across my driveway. The moving truck idled quietly in the street. 4 men hopped out and got straight to work without asking questions. I stood by the door with a clipboard checking off rooms. They were efficient and fast. My heavy furniture, the antique dining set, and my favorite armchair were all loaded and strapped down, destined for a secure storage unit across the state. By 5:15 a.m., the house was a hollow shell. Voices echoed against the bare walls. "That's everything, ma'am." The foreman nodded, handing me the receipt. I handed him the cash tip I promised. I grabbed my winter coat and my 2 suitcases. I walked through the kitchen one last time, checking the water valves under the sink. Tightly shut. The house felt entirely dead, completely detached from the 30 years of memories I built here. It was just wood and drywall now. I stepped outside into the crisp morning air and locked the heavy front door. I placed the house key inside a metal lockbox attached to the porch railing and spun the dial. The real estate agent and the new owner were the only ones with the code. My ride pulled up to the curb just as the sun began to paint the horizon in shades of orange and purple. I climbed into the back seat and gave the house one final look. There was no sadness, no regret, just a deep, expansive sense of relief. "Airport, please," I told the driver. As we merged onto the highway, my old cell phone chimed in my purse. Vanessa was awake. "We are packing the U-Haul now. Make sure the driveway is clear for my dad's truck," the text read. I smiled, powering the device off completely. I leaned back against the seat and watched the city blur past the window. My flight boarded in exactly 2 hours. They were heading toward a brick wall, and I was flying toward the ocean. I sat in the airport lounge with a black coffee and a fresh blueberry muffin. My boarding pass to Charleston sat on the table. It was 8:00 a.m. Vanessa and her family were scheduled to arrive at my house right about now. I couldn't resist. I reached into my bag, pulled out my tablet, and opened the security camera app. The cameras were hardwired and still connected to the house's internet, which transferred to the new owner at noon. The screen loaded. My old driveway was chaotic. A massive U-Haul truck was parked awkwardly, half on the lawn. Vanessa's parents sat in folding chairs near the garage, looking exhausted and annoyed. Arthur stood by the front door, furiously typing on his phone. Vanessa was the main attraction. She yanked on the front door handle, her face red and contorted. She kicked the heavy oak door. I watched her point a finger directly at Arthur's chest, shouting something I couldn't hear. Arthur shrunk back. His shoulders slumped. He pointed at the metal lockbox on the railing. Vanessa lunged at it, spinning the dials frantically. "She tried my birthday," Arthur's birthday, her birthday. Nothing popped it open. Then she walked up to the front window and cupped her hands around her face to peer inside. Even through the grainy camera feed, I saw her posture completely collapse. She staggered back. The living room was entirely empty. No rugs, no couches, no comforting mother-in-law waiting to serve them breakfast. She whipped out her phone and put it to her ear. A second later, the old cell phone at the bottom of my purse vibrated. I took it out, pulled the back cover off, and popped out the SIM card. I dropped the tiny piece of plastic into the nearest trash can. The camera feed showed Vanessa screaming into the air, throwing her arms up in total defeat. Her parents finally stood up, realizing their free ride had just evaporated. Flight 412 to Charleston is now boarding, the overhead speaker announced. I closed the app, picked up my bags, and walked toward the gate. By late afternoon, I was unlocking the door to my new life. It was a small 2-bedroom cottage just 3 blocks from the South Carolina coast. The salty breeze blew through the screened-in porch, carrying the sound of crashing waves. I had rented it for a full year, paid in cash up front. I dragged my suitcases inside and took a deep breath. The silence was incredible. No heavy footsteps from Arthur dragging his boots across my carpet. No sharp, demanding voice from Vanessa criticizing my choice of curtains. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant ocean. I unpacked quickly. My grandmother's jewelry box went on the dresser. My clothes filled a quarter of the closet. That was it. I didn't need much anymore. Around 6, I walked down to a local seafood shack and ordered a crab cake sandwich. While I ate, I bought a new prepaid phone from the pharmacy next door. I needed a clean slate, a new number, a new area code, a new existence. I sat on my porch as the sun went down, listening to the crickets. For years, I believed that keeping the peace meant sacrificing my own. I let Vanessa plant her expensive roses in my garden and hand me the bill. I let Arthur use my credit card for emergencies that somehow included golf clubs and luxury car leases. They mistook my patience for weakness. They thought my silence meant compliance. I finished my iced tea and smiled at the empty chair across from me. I was 64 years old, and for the first time in a decade, I didn't have to manage anyone else's crisis. My new phone buzzed in my hand. I hadn't given the number to anyone except Martha, my loyal neighbor from back home. "Are you settled?" her text read. "Perfectly," I replied. "Good. Because you won't believe the circus that happened on our street today." I leaned forward in my chair. The gossip was just starting. I called Martha immediately. She answered on the first ring, chuckling. "Claudette, you absolute legend!" Martha beamed through the speaker. "I have been watching the most entertaining reality show out my front window all day." I smiled, kicking my feet up on the porch railing. "Tell me everything." According to Martha, the U-Haul sat in the driveway for 6 hours. After realizing the house was entirely empty and locked tight, Vanessa threw a massive tantrum on the front lawn. She accused Arthur of hiding the truth from her, screaming that he was useless. "Her parents tried to break a window in the back," Martha said. "Can you believe that I almost called the authorities, but the new owner actually showed up?" I sat up straight. "The developer, yes, he pulled up in a shiny black SUV with a contractor." Vanessa ran up to him, demanding to know who he was. When he showed her the deed and told them they were trespassing on a construction site, her father turned pale white. They had no choice but to pack themselves back into the vehicles. They drove away with a fully loaded moving truck and absolutely nowhere to go. No money from their own house sale, since it all went to her parents' debt, and no free mansion to crash in. Arthur looked like a kicked puppy. Martha noted her voice softening just a bit. "He just stood there while she humiliated him in front of the contractor." "He chose his passenger seat a long time ago, Martha." He has to learn to steer, I replied firmly. I thanked her for keeping an eye on things and hung up. I didn't feel a shred of guilt. I had cut the financial rope. A month before I sold the house, I quietly canceled the emergency credit card Arthur carried. I removed myself as a guarantor on his car lease. Every string was severed. I went inside, locked my new sturdy front door, and slept for 9 uninterrupted hours. Tomorrow, I had a beach to walk. 3 weeks passed. My days fell into a beautiful, healing rhythm. I woke up early, walked along the shoreline, bought fresh groceries from the local market, and read books I had put off for years. The sun was melting away the tension I had carried in my shoulders for a decade. I hadn't heard a single word from my family, mostly because I made it impossible. Then, on a rainy Tuesday morning, I opened my laptop to check my bank statements. A new email sat in my inbox. The subject line was blank. The sender was Arthur. He must have guessed my email address or remembered it from years ago. I clicked it open, sipping my black coffee. The message was long, rambling, and full of misery. He explained that they were currently living in a cramped, overpriced 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of town. Vanessa's parents were sleeping in the living room and complaining constantly. Vanessa blamed him for everything, and their marriage was hanging by a thread. Not once in the 4 paragraphs did he ask how I was. Not once did he apologize for Vanessa's original text or for trying to force 4 adults into my home. The entire email was building up to the final paragraph. Mom, we are drownings here. Vanessa's parents have nothing left. We need a temporary loan to put a down payment on a new place, just until we get back on our feet. I know you have the cash from the house. Please, I'm your son. I rested my chin on my hand. He still didn't understand. He thought my disappearance was just a dramatic temper tantrum. He believed that if he sounded pathetic enough, I would crack open my checkbook and fix his life again. He thought the old Claudette was still alive. I hit reply. I didn't write an essay. I didn't list his faults or Vanessa's disrespect. I typed exactly 1 sentence. I wish you luck on your new journey, but the bank is permanently closed. I hit send, closed the laptop, and walked out to the porch. Sending that email didn't bring me anxiety. It brought finality. For days afterward, I expected him to try again. I expected angry emails from Vanessa, or perhaps a long, guilt-tripping message from her parents. But nothing came. My single sentence had hit its mark. It wasn't an argument they could fight against. It was a reinforced steel wall. Without my money padding their mistakes, the reality of their choices crushed them. Fall turned into a mild, breezy winter. I spent my afternoons volunteering at a local animal shelter, something I never had the time or energy to do back home. I made friends with the other volunteers, women my age, who didn't view me as a resource, but as a person. We drank wine on Fridays and laughed until our ribs ached. Just before Christmas, Martha called me with an update. Vanessa left him, she announced, skipping the small talk. I stopped chopping vegetables for my dinner. What happened? The money dried up completely, Martha explained. Without your credit cards and your house, she actually had to live on Arthur's salary. Her parents got tired of the tiny apartment and moved to Ohio to live with Vanessa's sister. Vanessa packed her bags a week later. Arthur was now living in a cheap studio apartment, finally forced to budget his own meals and pay his own bills. He was 35 years old, learning how to survive for the very first time. I thanked Martha and ended the call. I stood in my quiet, warm kitchen looking out at the ocean. A small part of a mother's heart always aches for her child's pain. But the larger, wiser part of me knew this was necessary. By removing myself, I gave Arthur the greatest, harshest gift possible: total responsibility for his own life. I put the vegetables in the pan, listening to the satisfying sizzle. I had a holiday party to attend tomorrow, and I needed to bake a pie. A full year has passed since I left my keys in that metal lockbox. My cottage feels entirely like home now. The small garden out front is filled with bright hibiscus and tough coastal grass. Nobody tells me what to plant, and nobody hands me a bill for flowers I didn't want. I sit on my porch this morning, watching the sunrise turn the water into a sheet of sparkling gold. My life is small, simple, and fiercely protected. Last week, Arthur sent me a short email. It wasn't a request for money. It was a picture of a small, clean apartment and a note saying he got a promotion at work. He mentioned he was learning to cook and asked for my old lasagna recipe. I sent it to him along with a note telling him I was proud of his progress. We are taking small steps, very small. He knows better than to ask to visit right now, and he certainly knows better than to ask for a loan. We are slowly building a relationship based on mutual respect, not financial dependency. As for Vanessa, I neither know nor care where she ended up. She played a greedy game, assuming she controlled the board, only to find out I owned the table. I finish my coffee and stand up. The air smells like salt and freedom. At 65, I finally understand that walking away isn't a sign of weakness. Sometimes silence and distance are the most powerful moves you can make. I didn't need to yell, argue, or hire anyone to reclaim my life. I just packed my bags, locked the door, and let them deal with the mess they created. I grab my sun hat and step out the screen door, heading down the wooden path toward the beach. The day is wide open, entirely mine, and I have never felt so beautifully, wonderfully alive.